How y'all doing today? It's me. Some of the unsung heroes of the Cold War. It's not like the B-52 Straddle Fortress, the F-4 Phantom II, the A-4 Skyhawk, the F-8 Crusader. None of those. But the unsung heroes that proudly served our nation. And I'm going to give you the full details right now. As World War II was ending in 1945, with the U.S. having no enemies, none whatsoever, and it was only just 3 years after World War II had officially ended. In 1947, the Soviet Union had placed a blockade around East and West Germany. That means no supplies could not get in, and none couldn't leave, because the Soviets had the borders blocked. And the only way that supplies would be able to get in is by air. And it was Curtis LeMay, the former commanding officer of the U.S. 21st Bombardment Wing, that flew the historic atomic bomb raids against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, had placed together a group of aviators and aircraft that would be able to bring supplies into the beleaguered citizens of Berlin. And they would need flour, they would need other things. And one came up with an idea of one of the crews on a Douglas C-54 had placed candy for the children of Berlin, wrapped handkerchiefs around the candy, and once they reached their drop zone, he threw the candy bars out to the kids down below, and the kids were so grateful for their gifts from above. The Douglas C-54 Skymaster was one aircraft that was introduced by the Douglas Aircraft Corporation in 1943 as a four-engine long-range cargo transport plane. It wouldn't be able to carry tanks or any other heavy equipment, just jeeps and supplies that the troops needed. And basically the C-54 was the first aircraft to be used by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the aircraft was known as the Sacred Cow long before Air Force One came into the encyclopedia. And the C-54 would serve long with the U.S. Army Air Force and later with the U.S. Air Force, and it would serve up throughout the late 1940s and well into the 1950s, and eventually the U.S. Air Force did away with the C-54 because that the C-54 was getting old. And one of the other unsung heroes was the Fairchild C-119 flying boxcar. The boxcar was introduced in the late 1940s, and it would participate in the very first dropping of military troops behind enemy lines during the Korean War. The C-119 was very unusual for an aircraft. The airframe was right in the center, and you had the wings, the engines, and the two twin booms for the C-119. And the C-119 was delivered to the U.S. Air Force in 1951. And it would serve throughout the Korean War, up to the Vietnam War, and eventually the C-119 was never heard from again, and the aircraft went into obscurity. The other was the Grumman S2 Tracker. The Tracker was a twin-engine turboprop that was developed for the U.S. Navy in the mid-1950s by Grumman in Bethpage, New York, and it would carry a single torpedo, 5-inch rockets, depth charges, and bombs. The S2 did not have no guns. It had no way of protecting itself. It had a MAD sensor where it would be able to detect Soviet submarines and alert destroyers that were armed with nuclear depth charges. And during the Cold War, it was to be more scarier by the early 1960s, and before the Vietnam War had started in 1965. The S2 was served with the U.S. Navy well up until the 1970s, and then the S2 was eventually replaced by the Lockheed S3 Viking. The Viking is a ASW, anti-surface warfare aircraft that was stationed off the U.S. Navy's aircraft carriers during the Cold War, when the S3 made its main flight begin in 1976. The first of the S3s were delivered to the U.S. Navy in 1978. They were used for COD, carry-on delivery, and others were to be used for in-flight refueling. And the S3 was slowly being phased out by the 2000s and was being replaced by the F-18 Hornet. And the S3, along with the S2 Tracker, is still one of the unsung heroes of the Cold War. And last but not least, the Lockheed SP-2 Neptune. It was developed in the early 1950s. The first of the Neptunes were delivered to the U.S. Navy. Both the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army would use the Neptune during the Vietnam War before the type was eventually phased out and was replaced by the Lockheed P-3 Orion. Now, tell me if I missed some things, and I'll get back to you on it. And I would like to say thank you very much for watching this video. And please, like always, like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, see you later.